Mic check 1 2 1 2. It's the Y2K collector, and hopefully the week has been treating you well. This morning I decided to input some more games into GameEye. As many of you know, I had to change my phone and lost all of my GameEye data. And so this morning I went ahead and I input all of my Game Boy games into GameEye. And as you can see, I don't have a huge Game Boy collection. I've only got a few games, but every single game that you see here is a game from my childhood. And I put well over 100 hours into each and every one of these games that you're seeing here. Granted, I did that probably over 20 years ago now, but these games are all games that mean a lot to me. And as I was inputting the games and as I was kind of, just tallying everything up, I realized that I still have about 4 more collections to input into GameEye. I still have the rest of my GBA collection, my PSP collection, my PS Vita collection, well, I guess 5, my PS4 collection, and my Switch collection. So I still got a ways to go. Now, for those of you who are interested, I'm just going to give you the total dollar amount that I'm at right now. So as it stands today, with 47 consoles and only 400 games input into GameEye, I have a total collection value of roughly around $42,000, which obviously is nothing in comparison to some of the other collectors out there. You've got folks who've got thousands of games, but I told myself coming out of 2023 that I did not want to have a collection with more than 1,000 games in it. Why? Because I'm just really not interested in building a video game museum in my home. And the only games that I wanted in my collection were the ones that meant something to me, or games that I really, really want to play and sit down and beat. And I don't think any one of us will have enough time. If you're a working adult with responsibilities, the odds of you completing 1,000 games is really, really slim to none, unless you spend like your entire retirement playing video games. But that's another topic for another video. The reason why I'm making this video today is because as I started to look at my Game Boy and I, looked at my Switch, I started to realize that the perception of gamers has changed over the last 25 years. And it's crazy. And I'm really interested to bring this topic to the forefront, because I'm really interested in knowing what other folks think about this. Now, I grew up in the 90s, right? And in the 90s, when you were going to school, you had 3 types of kids. You had the dork, you had the nerd, and then you had like the cool kid, right? And I think growing up, sometimes the dork and the nerd, those words were used interchangeably, but they're very, very different when you start to really look at them. Now, dork, like the meaning of a dork, is really someone who's like socially inept. They're awkward. They just socially, they're just not on target, right? But a nerd is someone who's just really, really enthusiastic about something, and they usually have a lot of knowledge about that thing that they're really enthused about. So you can have video game nerds, you could have math nerds, you could have sneaker nerds, you could have whatever kind of nerd you want, as long as it's something you're really enthusiastic about. I think that's what qualifies you as a nerd. And then the cool kid, cool is such a subjective word that it's hard to contain in one sentence, right? But usually the cool kids were the kids who were socially on point, right? They usually were fashionably trendy. They usually were the kids who had the cool things, like in high school. If you were the dude or the girl with the cool car, that made you cool. In high school, if you had the latest fashion, that made you cool. And then sometimes, especially in the 90s, things that were bad for us were perceived as cool, right? And it's unfortunate that way, but in high school, if you were a kid who maybe smoked, then maybe you were perceived as cool, even though smoking is horrible for your health. It destroys your lungs and causes cancer. Somehow we thought that was cool in the 90s and even back in the 80s, right? But as it pertains to video games, and I'm going to refer to the Game Boy, because I remember bringing my Game Boy to school sometimes. And if you were caught walking around with one of these, like in the 90s, you were instantly put in the dork/nerd category. But I think that that has changed over time, and people are starting to really recognize the differences between nerds and dorks. And the perception of gamers over the last 25 years has actually shifted, right? And we've been able to actually separate the nerds from the dorks. Now, it just so happens that back in the 90s and the 80s, dorks, because they were inept, they typically gravitated towards video games because they weren't invited to the parties. They weren't they never went to the dances because they couldn't get a date. And this is me speaking at a high level, right? Obviously, this isn't the case for everyone, but usually dorks and nerds were dropped into the same category because dorks often defaulted to video games because from a social standpoint, there really wasn't much else that they could do other than their schoolwork and then play video games. But I felt like growing up in school, I was definitely more of a nerd. Why do I say that? You had that group of kids, and I think we all knew this kid. Like, you knew this kid in school. And let me know in the comments if I'm wrong. But there was always that one kid who just kind of seemed to be able to blend into all groups, meaning he or she, they played video games and they were super enthusiastic about video games. But every time they came to school, they always had the newest pair of Jordans. They always had the Carl Kanai jeans, or the Jordache jeans when Jordache was popular, or the Guess jeans, or the Hugo Boss jeans, or Tommy Hilfiger jeans, right? I know I'm dating myself here, but back in the 90s, you had that kid who was super enthusiastic about video games, loved video games, played video games, but they were still considered cool because they were socially on point. They dressed well, they had a cool car, they got all the guys or got all the girls, and they were always invited to all of the social events because they were cool. But that same kid who was considered cool and was allowed to sit at the cool table, they were still able to join the nerds and play video games and enjoy video games. And somehow it never diminished their coolness, right? It never took away from them because people understood just innately that this person was eclectic. And I personally felt like I fell into that category because growing up, especially in school, I've always been a fashion head. I've always been a Jordan head. I've always been a sneaker head. So any chance I could, even if it meant me shoveling snow, mowing grass, doing a paper route, selling lemonade, I did whatever I needed to do to make sure that my feet were on point when it came to Jordans. But all throughout school, I still relished in video games. I had my Game Boy, I brought it to school, and I hung out with the gamers because the gamers, they always had the best games. See, all the other kids, if they did have video games, they usually had like the AAA titles, right? They had the basic games, Super Mario Land, Super Mario World. But when you hung out with the nerds and the dorks, they had all the cool stuff. They knew about all the exclusive games that no one else was talking about. They were the ones who were playing Thunder Force 3. They were the ones who were playing Revenge of Shinobi. They were the ones, and back in the day, when you were a kid, you couldn't afford to buy all the games, so you needed to be friends with the dorks and the nerds so that you could borrow their games and play them. But I think that perception has changed over time, right? And now, because gaming has become so commercialized, people have been able to change their perception of gamers. And now, if you're a person who walks into a room and you're carrying a Switch Lite in your hand, it's not like the 90s where people are going to instantly classify you, oh, that guy's a dork, or oh, that guy's a nerd. I think it's actually changed, and I think it's due in part to the way gaming has changed. Because there are so many more genres of gaming, including life simulators, when we think about things like The Sims, when we think about things like, what is it? What was that game? Not Monster Rancher. I'm drawing a complete blank right now. But any type of life simulator games. There was a big game during the pandemic that Animal Crossing, right? Animal Crossing was a game that was being played by everyone because it was a digital version of social interaction. When you think about games like World of Warcraft, these are all games that are, yes, they're video games, but they incorporate this social aspect that's made it convenient and acceptable for even non-gamers to indulge in those types of games and not be considered a dork or a nerd. And I think in today's society, we're now able to separate the two. I think we can clearly delineate what a nerd is from what a dork is. And the folks that are socially inept are always going to be socially inept. They're always going to have difficulty making friends, both in the real world and in the digital world. And then you have those folks who are one person when they're behind closed doors or when they're behind a screen versus when they're in a big crowd of people. But I feel like overall the perception of gamers over the last 20 to 25 years has changed, and now more than ever before, it's become cool. Gaming has become cool. I even saw an interview with Elon Musk where Elon Musk said video games is a great way for him to relax his mind. Like he enjoys playing video games to decompress. And I think that's how a lot of us view it today. But I'm interested to know your thoughts. Do you think that the perception of gamers has changed over the last 20 years? Or do you think that even in 2024, if you say I'm a gamer, people are instantly going to classify you as a nerd or a dork? I think that they've changed. I'm interested to know your thoughts. I'm the Y2K collector. I'll keep you updated with the total value of my collection as I continue to input these games, because I know that's something that folks have been asking for. And I've also gotten a couple comments about showing my collection and letting everyone see what's in my collection. I actually did a 5-part collection video. It's in my channel. If you want to go see my collection, I break down my collection by console and by handhelds. It's like a 5-part series. But I know a lot of times y'all like the kind of one-stop shop, video where you just are able to see everything in the collection in one video. So I may do like a collection update here pretty soon. And then also just another quick announcement. I know sometimes I just, I kind of just show one thing. I don't show a bunch of like background video or B-roll, because a lot of my videos are meant to be heard more so than they're meant to be seen. Usually these are videos that you can just kind of play in the background as you're playing your own video games or cleaning or whatever it is you're doing. Typically when I do a lot of the B-roll stuff and I get real edit crazy, for some reason those videos, they just don't get any screen time. So I'm going to try to figure out a way to kind of incorporate this style as well as, some of the B-roll style, maybe in a more effective way. But we're growing. We are growing. And I want to say a huge thank you to everyone who's recently subscribed to the channel. We just crossed 2,000 subscribers. That's crazy. It might seem like small change to some, but that's huge to me, man. I really appreciate all the love, all the support, and I'm realizing that more people are watching from all over the world. I've gotten comments from the UK, from Asia, from different parts of the world, and it just goes to show how alive the gaming community is and how much people still enjoy it, especially retro games. So more videos to come. And again, please leave your comments down below. Do you think the perception of the gamer has changed over the last 25 years or so? I'm interested to know your thoughts. I'm the Y2K collector. Have a good one.